Okay, so now we must be careful, watch what you say. No more stories about young wives, no. Everyone who's out there missed out, and we apologize. We will not be repeating the story for our Zoom recording. Now they're really trying to figure out what in the world just happened, but
They should show up in person.
there you go. Come a little early, you would have gotten a good story. All right, well, we have a lot to do, so let us jump right in. Parshas Toldos. And the first question, I think as I go through Parsha by Parsha, right, it seems that his introductions are fascinating and most of his verse commentary is very technical. Just maybe a little too technical to be exciting, if we could say that, but there is enough in the introduction to each section where he kind of takes an overview for us to work with. So the first question he deals with is, if you look, it's 124 in the art scroll. It's the beginning of Parshas Toldos for anyone out there. I'll give everyone just a second if you want to grab Sefaria or any other. You can grab a book. All right. Eila Toldot Yitzchak ben Abraham, Abraham Olida Yitzchak, and Yitzchak is 40 years old. He takes Rivka, right? And then the story will continue that he's having the twins. He's trying to figure out, so the first thing he says is this is not really the beginning of the story of Yitzchak, right? We actually, where did the stories of Yitzchak begin?
Birth.
Well, birth. Yeah.
Okay.
Birth, but that's okay. But the Akedah, which is the end of Parshas Vayera. And then the bulk of Chaye Sarah is finding a wife for Yitzchak. Right, so Eila told us Yitzchak, it starts, he's 40 years old. It's not really the story of Yitzchak. Right, the story of Yitzchak has begun earlier, and one might say that maybe the most important episode in his life is the Akedah. Right, certainly in the world of the Medrash, it colors Yitzchak forever. As you would imagine it would, because his father almost whacked him, right? Like that would be traumatizing, but the Midrashim, without using, modern day psychological language, because I don't know that they had that at their fingertips, but they essentially are tapping into the trauma, right, of the Akedah for Yitzchak and how it affects the rest of his life. Right, there are many, that's not that's just my ad-lib commentary, so it's not Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman. But one could argue that really Eila told us Yitzchak should start with the Akedah. So the first question he does with is, why should that be? And his theory is, right, that Eila told us Yitzchak is when Yitzchak begins to stand on his own. It's the beginning of his story that's not being impacted by others. Right? I mean, the Akedah is driven by Abraham. The search for a wife is driven by Abraham and the servant, we'll call him Eliezer. And now he finally comes into his own. So he thinks that's not so hard to figure out. More difficult to figure out is how much of this parsha is actually about Yitzchak, or Yitzchak being active, right?
It's not a very subject drama.
Well, so we'll get to that in a second, right? But the very beginning, if you look at 126, I won't make you read through the whole parsha right now, but I'll jump you through the highlights. Right, 126, the kids are born, right, and then you have this business with Esav and Yaakov and the selling of the Bechor, the selling of the birthright, right, which is sort of about Yitzchak, but not really about Yitzchak.
My English translation here says that Toldot is just the offspring. So it's really not about him at all. It's about his kids.
He said it's not really about his meaning
it's a story of, the beginning of Yaakov and Esav. He just sort of passes through it.
Right, so if you look in Parshas Vayesha, this he doesn't deal with, and I'm less interested with English translation than I am with commentary.
What is the translation?
So when we get to Parshas Vayesha, if you can remind me, Rashi and his grandchildren have a very big argument about the word Toldos, but we'll hold off on that. I want to try and stay focused because he makes a fabulous point. Right, then you have the business with the wells, right? Well, first he goes down and you have,
Wife,
right, to
my
Abimelech,
sister.
my wife is my sister. Then you have the business with the wells, right? On 132, the end of Perek Chavav, a little bit of Esav marrying people they didn't like. And then Perek Chav Zayin is really about, it's about everybody, but it's really about Yitzchak and Rivka stealing, sorry, Yaakov and Rivka stealing the brachos from Yitzchak. He's not really the player there, he is the playee, if you will. Then he says, I have a harder time trying to explain why a big part of the Toldos of Yitzchak is really the story of Yaakov and Esav. So he says something, and I'll read it to you a little bit, because I think this is the secret to understanding Yitzchak. Right? Meaning Yitzchak doesn't seem to be a very strong character. He doesn't seem to get a lot of face time because he doesn't, because it gets right. And it seems like other people are playing on him more than it is that he's the center of attention. So this is an idea which you'll hear in the last 20, 30 years. Certainly, I'm very familiar with it coming out of the Gush Beis Medrash, that idea, but here it is 100 years before that in the commentary of Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman. He writes, nevertheless, Yitzchak Avinu looks like he is pachot pa'il, but he is less active, like a right in the Toldot of the Avot of the right, certainly is less active than Abraham and much less active than Yaakov. And that, he says, is simply the nature of how things should be. Right? What was Abraham's role? Abraham is a trailblazer. I mean, he finds God, he starts these things, he's all over the place, he's a warrior, but he's the guy who gets everything going. And to be the guy who gets everything going, you have to be active, you have to be all over the place, you have to have this right enthusiasm and will and drive and things that make you go. And therefore it says mina hechrech, it has to be shechayav yu mele'e ma'as, that is, his life will be full of action, because otherwise Abram would have been a nobody, right? You can't start something unless you're somebody, unless you're active and you're out there. Yaakov, right, is really the beginning of the Jewish people, right? And therefore it's also more complicated. I mean, he has to learn to deal with the outside world. He has to gather all of his kids. He has to mess up his kids. Oh wait, yeah. Gemara says that. I didn't, by the way. The Gemara says, you know what you learn from the story of Yaakov and Yosef and the colored coat? Don't do that to your children. The Gemara says, I didn't say that, right? The Gemara says that is what you learn from the story. One of the messages is don't do that, right? Don't choose favorites, because look what happens.
At least it wasn't the mother's fault. It's always the mother's fault.
No, the women don't get enough playtime, Linda, to be their fault. We relegate them to the sidelines, Linda.
Okay, for once.
It wasn't their
Use
fault.
modern psychology.
And that's being recorded. Shoot. Okay, I'm in trouble. Anyways, Lo Chen Yitzchak, he says, who stands right between them. Right, and his job is to keep things going. It's not to be active and crazy like Abram, because then it's going to go from here to somewhere else, right? Sometimes there needs to be a stabilizing force to get you from trailblazing Abraham to Yaakov, who will then branch out and become the Jewish people. Right? Having faith, keeping the tradition. Otherwise, Abram's just a one-off. Right? Yitzchak's job is to keep that tradition going, to keep it flowing, to do everything that Abraham did so that it gets entrenched, and that will allow it to transfer to the next generation. Again, think about it. What does Yitzchak do? His wife is my sister. Did that happen before?
Abraham.
Abraham, of course, he did, right? The wells that he digs are the wells that
His father did.
his father dug. He doesn't do anything new, except for have twins. Right? That he manages to do. Not twice,
He also
not
planted
twice,
the-
but but he did manage to do it.
He also plants a field, plants.
He plants
and
a
does
field.
well, which is new. Abraham was a shepherd and didn't,
Well, Avram did pretty good for himself.
he did, but he didn't,
Avram,
With
as
agriculture.
we say in this neck of the woods, Avram had flus.
he did, but he wasn't in agriculture.
He
There were
was
no
not an
farmers, so
agriculturist,
it's
yes, but there's
something.
the overwhelming amount of Yitzchak stories are really just doing what Avram did, but that says with David Tzvi Hoffman, that's the point. Right? The point is to sometimes, and for some generations, the point is just to keep that tradition flowing. That's an important role. And that is the role of Yitzchak. So as I said, it's in the last number of years that idea is floating around, but I think you heard it here first. So that's how he puts Yitzchak's life kind of in broader perspective. And I think it's a nice appreciation for Yitzchak, right? That Yitzchak served a really critical and important role. That after trailblazing people, there has to be somebody who continues it. You probably see that, running throughout history as well. But that's for another time. Okay, so that was point number one.
Isn't it kind of like their tefillos also, sort of,
Right.
Shachris is the morning prayer and Marv is the evening prayer when it's dark, and Mincha is sort of transition.
Mincha is sort of that transition, but that's assuming a whole lot, Barry, right? I actually, that was a failed, one of my failed drasha attempts for this week. Was the meaning of Lasuach Basadeh. Apparently wasn't meant to be. I was playing around with it a little bit, and then I gave up and moved on. If anyone's here, you'll get a great drush about the wells. Well, I hope it's good.
I have a question though.
Yes,
My
please.
question is, Yitzchak still did not make right decisions in terms of the brachas for his sons. Like,
So we'll get there. Hold off on that thought.
okay,
That's on my next page of notes. I'm still on my
okay,
first
all right.
page.
I don't have
So-
your notes. Okay.
Can you read them?
No.
That I don't think anyone. I'm glad I can read them, right? And I can still read it without reading glasses, which is pretty good.
Not-
Most things I can't anymore. Okay, so the next comment I thought was fascinating. Right, so he has the twins. Let's go back to the beginning. I promise I'll get to the end, Linda. Right, this is on 126. It's Parak Chav Hey, chapter 25, verse Chav Zayin, right, 27. Right, Vayigdalu Ha'ne'arim Va'yesav Ish Yodea Tzayid Ish Sadeh. Right, the kids grow up as, right, as a puzzle we're all very familiar with. Esav is a hunter, or he knows about hunting. He's a person in the field. V'Yaakov Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim. Right, Yaakov is a tent dweller, right? Either a shepherd or a scholar, a big Talmid Chacham. Right, Yaakov Avinu is sitting in the mirror, steiging, while Esav goes to work. No, get back to that. Hold that thought. We'll get back to that. I promise. It's a good thing nobody actually listens to this online. You can really get in a lot of trouble. Okay.
We could edit.
Nah, it's okay. I don't mind. I'll stand by that statement. If according to that medrash, that might actually answer Linda's question, but that we'll get back to in just a second. Right. So that's how they're portrayed. And then it goes into this story of right, Esav's coming from the field and Yaakov's making his lentil soup. And it seems that Yaakov takes advantage of Esav. That's one way to read the story. The poor guy is exhausted. He's gonna go. He's so tired. He's gonna die. Right, figurative, literally. He's exhausted, and Yaakov says to him, "I'll give you the food. Give me your birthright." Is that what? Do we think that's fair? We think that's nice. Good idea? Bad idea? What do we
It's
think?
not fair. Definitely not fair.
Why?
Because when Esau says, I'm going to die, he's actually exaggerating.
Well, then it should be really fair. Meaning, if we're reading that it's exaggerating.
Die, then he would
Right.
give up anything not to die. He's gonna die. He's
Right,
very,
I agree with that. I don't think he's really gonna die, because I don't think he was that starving. Right? In which case, what's wrong? Do we think Yaakov was right in proposing this sale? What do we think?
I think it sounds like brothers.
No.
Sounds like brothers. Okay. Is that good or bad? She won't say. Lori won't say, but she don't think that's good. Right? What do we think of Yaakov's conduct? You're being recorded. No, feel free to, I've already said enough. Say whatever you want.
He had his priority. That was the most important thing to him.
Did he take advantage of Esav?
Yeah, but okay.
Yes, but okay. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, he did take
And
advantage.
what was being sold and their values on.
I mean, the birthright probably is worth more than a bowl of soup.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
It's good soup.
It's good.
So
yours to sell.
So Jeff's asking a separate question, which he doesn't deal with, which is a very good question, which is, can you actually sell your birthright? So we're gonna table that for a moment. That's a very good question. So he makes just an interesting point. Esav does this willingly, right? It's not done against his will, assuming that Eve is right and that I'm gonna go die is an exaggeration. Right? I'm so tired, I'm gonna go, it's not really gonna die. He says that it ties right back to the description of strength, the relative strengths of Yaakov and Esav. Right? If Yaakov and Esav were to fight, who was going to win?
Esav.
Esav.
Every day of the week. And therefore, what does Yaakov have to do? He has to find another way to be successful. He has to use his wits.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, he sees this. I'm not sure. I can't figure out whether I like it or not. But I'll tell you. But he basically says Yaakov is the more cerebral of the two, and he's reading, Yoshebo Halim as scholar, thought person as opposed to shepherd, and that he simply was using his God-given gifts to outdo his brother. He didn't
Mhm.
lie. He didn't steal. It was a bargain. It was,
Right.
I thought it was a neat perspective on. I can't tell if I like it, but it was a neat perspective on the sale of the birthright, meaning you got to use the strengths that you have, and if you can't beat them in a fight, outsmart them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
well, it's just, it's something that Esau holds in very low esteem. He doesn't really care about it. And so
Right.
So that's an
So
excellent
that-
segue to it. So the second point, which redeems, I think, in my eyes, the commentary, he says that what really is, although it's a little bit out of order, but look at the psukim again, right? Yaakov makes this suggestion, and Esav says, right, what do I need it for? But if you keep reading, so it's on 128, this will be verse 34, pasuk lamed daled. V'Yaakov natan laEsav lechem u'nezir anashim vayochel vayesh vayakam vayelach vayivez Esav et habechora. Right, and Esav, here it says spurned, right? Bizayon is degraded, right? He really almost spits out the birthright. David Tzvi Hoffman says that if that wasn't Yaakov, if that wasn't Esav's response, Yaakov would never have gone along with the sale. I don't know where he gets that from.
he might never have proposed it. If you know your brother doesn't care about taking out
yes,
your
but
brother, then you can say, hey, why not sell it to me?
So in
he
the
knew it.
commentaries, it's about Esav's reaction. Almost that Yaakov, again, it's a hard read, but it's sort of redemptive, right? That if Esav had responded differently and said, listen, buddy, I'm not giving up the birthright. The birthright's so important. It's the continuity of Yitzchak in our family tradition. Yaakov would have just given him the soup and gone home. So unclear where he gets that from, but I think if you put the two of them together, right, it's a nicer composite picture. That Yaakov would have been happy to work alongside Esav. But once he saw his, how much he was disrespectful of that birthright and maybe of the tradition, at that point he used his guile and his intellect and his smarts in order to best his brother and take the birthright.
Did he spurn the birthright before or only after he already sold it, which sort of justifies it?
So that
I never liked
so-
it anyway.
that is a very good question, right? Whether when it says Vayivez Esav et haBechorah, so he doesn't address it, but since you raised it, is that reflecting back to I'm going to die, what do I need this for? That was the manner of disrespect. Or was this a second act of disrespect? That's a good question that the commentators will.
What happened to the sound?
What was that?
We don't hear you.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Anyone else having issues?
No, I'm
No.
okay now.
I can
Okay
hear you.
now.
All right, we're all good. Thank God. Maybe I cut out for the bad parts. I shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
recording anyways. That would be okay. But I'm not sure that worked. All right, but now let's get to, I think what is the most, certainly the most interesting part of the parsha. I think for everybody, it's the part that fascinates us, and this is what Linda mentioned before. The end of the parsha, right? The bulk of that chapter is really a crazy story about Yitzchak. Right, let's just turn to it. Right, it's chapter 27, so it's the bottom of 132, but really we'll start on 134. Right. Vayihiki zaken Yitzchak vatichena enav miraot. Yitzchak is old, his eyes don't see so good or so well.
Well,
I know well, thank you. I do know that. I have half a brain. But right. And Vayikra Esav beno agadol, he calls for Esav. He says, I'm not sure I'm going to die. Go out and get me some food. Right? Bring me the food so that I should bless you before I die. He basically says to his son, go get me some food. Let's have a nice meal. I want to give you a bracha. Now, Rivka Shoma'at, right? Rivka hears this and she goes into a panic, right? Because what does Rivka think? That Esav is going to get the bracha. Now, who does Rivka love? Yaakov.
Yeah.
Right? She wants Yaakov to get the bracha. And therefore, they propose this
scheme.
trickery scheme, call it what you like. Right? Not very good. And they really trick Yitzchak into giving the bracha to Yaakov as opposed to Esav, and then Esav comes back and he's all upset, right? So we have another question. We have Jeff's question, which is this the same as the birthright? Right? Maybe that was all just a joke. Right? Maybe the soup actually bought Yaakov nothing because it didn't seem to help him here. Nowhere in this story does it say, well, I bought it,
Mm-hmm.
and that never comes up again. All right. The other question, which he doesn't address, which we won't either really, is why doesn't Yitzchak just say, whoops, made a mistake, you can have it, Esav? Right, another fascinating question. But let's take the what was Yitzchak thinking and what was Rivka thinking? Right, those are really the most important questions. Right now, at face value, it seems like each parent has a favorite, and Yitzchak just picked the wrong horse. Right? That's what it seems like. It seems like Rivka has chosen the right horse, and maybe she goes about it in the wrong way, right? Because what should Rivka have done?
Spoken up.
To who?
Her husband.
Yes.
But he's very passive in everything. Yitzchak is a very
But all the more so that she could bully him. No? Right? I mean,
okay.
right? We all know couples where I think my parents are like that. My mother's in charge. Ask any of my family members. Everybody knows it. My mother's in charge. My father's not in charge. Right? So if that's the Rivka Yitzchak dynamic, so listen, if this was happening in my family, my mother would just tell him, Marty, you got the wrong kid. That would be it. It would be over. And my father actually would just say, okay. And they've been married for 55 some odd years, and they're pretty happy that way. But
Okay.
that's how it would go. Why doesn't Rivka do that? Especially if he's passive. He's not a strong personality. Go over and say, listen, you know I love you. What are you doing? Are you out of your mind? Look at this terrible child, or something like that. Or don't phrase it. Don't phrase it like that. Can't you see that Asa really is pulling the wool over your eyes? I mean, some sort of
This is a
conversation.
conversation that should have,
Not pulling the wool. Asa thinks, yep, I'm the older, so I'm gonna get a blessing.
I'm not
He
interested.
who spurned his birthright is not gonna remember all these years later.
I mean, but most of the information we have about Esav is not positive. He marries the wrong people. Nobody likes who he married. He's spurning the birthright. None of the stuff that we're given, even without going to the extent of the Medrash, which really hates Esav, the portrayal in the Chumash is not overly positive. And I'll add, the rest of the story clearly proves, right, that Yaakov was the right child. Meaning Rivka had it right. She did, because Yaakov has 12 tribes who become the Jewish people. Esav does not. He gets Har Seir and torments us for the rest of time. But meaning Rivka was correct. She chose the right horse. She had the right kid.
but it was a conversation she needed to have before Yitzhak says, go out and bring me cookies so I can bless you. It's already in play. This is a conversation that should have
I mean, he
taken
didn't give the
place.
bracha yet.
No, but Esav's
favoring Asa.
Right. So now in that version of this story, how have I portrayed Yitzchak? Gullible at best. Right?
foodie,
What?
a foodie.
A foodie.
The birthright was worth soup, and so the.
There's
blessing
nothing
is
wrong
worth
with being a
two.
foodie, but that can't be your
Wait,
top
no.
priority.
This is a Sudat mitzvah. That's why he was
Right.
asking for food.
Oh, go hunt me an animal. That's okay. I'm nothing against that, but right in that classic portrayal, which the Medrash certainly highlights. Although, to go back to my previous, Akedah trauma comment, right? There is a Medrash that says that how did Yitzchak's eyes get dimmed? The tears from the angels at the Akedah.
Yeah.
Right, but that meant they did. I promise you, the angels who don't have bodies didn't cry into his eyes. That was the rabbinic attempt at talking about the trauma and lasting trauma of the Akedah. I mean, they just put it in different language because they didn't have PTSD back in the days of the Medrash. They didn't have that language, but that's what that Medrash is saying. So either it affected him, right, or he was just old and gullible. But all of that kind of makes Yitzchak look like a shlamazel. And now I'll ask you the question, and I think for many, many years and centuries, that's how we read Yitzchak. Is that fair? And do we really want to read Yitzchak that way? Now, I will preface by saying there's no version of the story where both Yitzchak and Rivka come out smelling like roses. Something has to give, and one of them has to be in the wrong. Unless somebody can come up with a better explanation than I've seen so far, but I've seen a bunch of them.
This is Yitzchak meant for her to overhear, and he meant for Yaakov to either jump up and say, but I have the birthright, or for something to happen.
But that's still making him a little bit of a
And
goofball.
he actually knew
Right.
who it was who came to him, and he says, aha, this is the right son. I'll give him the right.
So that's still not a very good portrayal.
Had to get Asaph out of the house before it happened. I don't know.
Right. So this is another idea that the last X number of years has become, certainly Rabbi Yoel ben Nun has spoken about this very often, but as with the first idea, this is 100 years earlier in the commentary of David Tzvi Hoffman. Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman argues as follows over a number of psukim. And I think if we want to save Yitzchak, now it might be at the expense of Rivka, or maybe there's some version where we can save both a little bit, right? In this version, in Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman's version, Yitzchak knows exactly what's happening, right? His eyes are dim and he's old. Don't make him into a feeble-minded person. It just explains why this is happening now, because he's old, he's going to die. And the fact that he couldn't see is important because that enables the story to move forward. Is it Yaakov? Is it Esav? Come, let me feel you. Give me the goat skin. Those are just pieces of information that we need for the continuation of the story, but they're not indictments of Yitzchak's, senility, if you will. And what he believed, which I think is a very plausible argument. Yitzchak knows exactly who his kids are. He knows the strength of Esav and he knows the wisdom of Yaakov. And you know what he thinks? I don't have to choose. Why should I have to choose? Right? I will have scholarly ambition and I will have somebody who can hunt and maybe who can fight. And together, they will rule the kingdom. Right? He sees the strengths of both of his children. He understands that we need both of those strengths. And he sees, two leaders continuing the family tradition. Right? The same way that Yaakov has 12 children, each with different strengths, who become Bnei Yisrael. Why couldn't it have happened a generation earlier? Right? Now, we're just so used to, Avram had 2 kids and he had to choose one. So Yitzchak had 2 kids and he had to choose one. But did Yitzchak know that? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. But in the Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman version of this story, Yitzchak thought he wouldn't have to choose. And he would have these great, character traits, and they would both lead the people. And that would be how the Jewish people continues. And therefore, when he says, I'm going to give you a bracha, it's not to the exclusion of Yaakov. It's a particular bracha, which is fitting for Esav. And if you actually look at the brachos that are given, this is a material wealth bracha. It is not the spiritual bracha. That Yaakov actually gives to Yaakov later on. So Yitzchak gives to Yaakov later on. A good read actually supports this. Now, he doesn't address it, but we should. What does that do to Rivka?
She's worried for nothing.
Either she's worried for nothing and she's wrong, or she knew that
It needed to be one.
it needed to be one. How would she have known that? Let's go back to the beginning, right? What happens when the twins are running she doesn't have an ultrasound to see what's happening, so she goes to the man of God for a spiritual ultrasound, as it were. Right? I mean, that's really what's right. There's crazy things happening. The pregnancy is not normal. She goes to Droshat Hashem. She goes to either to Abram or to Shem or to whoever it was at the time. And actually, David Tzvi Hoffman has 3 or 4 possibilities. Right? It was Shem, it was Abraham, or it was just some random house of God that existed at the time where people went for spiritual advice.
And the baby was kicking.
Ability that she asked God directly.
No, then it would have just said it.
Yes, inquire. Yeah, it does say.
But I thought it said that
Drosha.
she goes to Shaman, the yeshiva Shaman Ever, because they say Shem was a prophet, and she was looking for an answer from God. Wasn't that the whole thing? I was reading it this morning.
I don't have time for my diatribe on the yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever.
Okay.
I think the third. I'm gonna let it go. I can't. I'm gonna let it go. Anyone who wants at a different time, you can ask me about the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. But wherever she goes, the word that comes back is, right? What is she told? Shnei goyim bivitnech. 124, Parak Chav Hey, Pasuk Chav Gimel 25-23. Right? Shnei goyim bivitnech, ushnei leumim ima'ach yuparedu.
Right.
La'om ye'ematz v'rab ya'avod sa'ir, that there are 2 different regimes. right? And they're going to be fighting against each other. So it seems that Rivka knows something Yitzchak doesn't know. Well, it has to be one or the other. So the best possible read for both Yitzchak and Rivka, even though at some level there should have been communication, is that Yitzchak thinks it can be both. Obviously, Rivka has never told him that it's going to be one. And that's maybe part of what this argument's about, right? But that is the best read to not really skewer one or the other, right? So that is how he explains. He says that he never thought that he would have to boot Esav, right? It just never crossed Yitzchak's mind. But I think, again, I think that that's the best way to read the story. It reflects best on both. And then the only question is, why didn't they have a conversation about this?
They
Right?
never did. They never had a conversation.
So the last thing I'll share with you tonight is not from Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman, but it is an astounding piece in the Netziv. And then I'll take any questions. The Netziv, who I'll remind you before I tell you what he says, was a Rosh Yeshiva, the last Rosh Yeshiva in Volozhin. Right, so he's not like some fringe lunatic person. He literally was Rosh Yeshiva in Volozhin, and he says that Yitzchak was so awesome a spiritual person that when Rivka first saw him, she fell off the camel because she was overwhelmed by his spirituality, and that created a gap between them that they never overcame till the end of their life. That's a very sad commentary, but maybe he's right. Right, that's what again the Netziv says that black on white. That's why she couldn't go over and just say Yitzchak. She just was too in awe of him from the outset, and they never really moved past that, and that led to a lack of communication, which ends up in the story with which we have.
I met all of you, so I'm going to trick you.
You got over it.
Let's
You got over it.
Or she just didn't feel like she can go over and tell him he was
I
wrong.
can't tell you directly.
Right. But it's an interesting thought. Anyways, with that, I will, I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has. Otherwise, we'll pick up next week. All right.
I
Have a good
think
night.
I think we have a visitor on this Zoom. Edna? She's not, but I think she was listening.
Okay, I think she's gone.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right, just playing with the computer, but we're gonna sign off
Okay.
as soon as Jeff figures out what I did wrong here.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good
Good night.
All right.
It's showing up here.
What is that? Oh, me. Oh, I have no idea.
It's a,
Let's just end the Zoom. Let me just end the Zoom. Then we can play with it. I